Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I saw the photograph of a child in her social media feed. A little boy, around 4 or 5, with bright blue eyes and a smile that spoke of some recent trip to a beach, judging by the sand clinging to his bare arms and the faint outline of waves behind him. I remember pausing, trying to recall whether I'd ever seen that child before. Not a friend's kid, not one of our nephews, just a stranger's son. The caption was simple: my pride and joy. And there, quietly standing out, was her name under the like button. My wife, Alice, offering her silent applause to a family photograph that didn't belong to us. It wasn't the first time I'd seen her likes on someone else's profile, but that child's face stirred a different kind of ache in me. The longing in the angle of her phone when she scrolled through the images, the quiet breath she took whenever something particularly intimate lit up her screen. Those small details used to pass me by. But that afternoon, I stared longer. In that moment, it felt as though I was peering at a reflection of a life that was never mine to claim, yet mine to suffer for. I recognized the account name. Michael Dow, some kind of creative professional out in Los Angeles. I glanced at it once before, weeks ago, when we were lying in bed, and she was thumbing through her phone, ignoring my attempts at conversation. She had turned the screen away from me then, as if it were second nature to hide something. I told myself people guard their privacy, nothing extraordinary. We all do that to some extent. But this was different. The repeated pattern of it, the timing, the subtle tensing of her shoulders whenever a notification arrived from him. That afternoon, I didn't say a word, just filed the sight in my memory. She liked not only that photo with the child, but half a dozen others. Pictures of him on a beach, him on a surfboard, him holding up a camera lens as if to frame the world. And beneath them, her small, admiring heart. If I had pressed that red icon on my own phone, I might have simply joined the crowd. But something told me to read the entire feed. So I did. It felt like a slow-motion unraveling of what I thought my marriage was. Each post told a bit more of a story. A dinner at some trendy restaurant, an inside joke in the comments that I didn't understand, a mention of late-night calls, references to meeting soon. Nothing explicit in text, but the subtext was carved into my mind the more I read. A mosaic of shared intentions. I remember feeling an odd heaviness in my chest, as though the air was thickening with each breath. Still, I waited, uncertain whether I was overreacting. Then I saw the direct messages. I don't recall how I had the presence of mind to keep from confronting her right then. I only remember the throbbing pulse in my temples as I scrolled. His words: I miss your voice. Hers: soon, I promise. I told myself, she's just being friendly, there's an innocent explanation. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew better. We all know that line we pretend we'll never cross. Later that evening, I asked in the calmest voice I could manage, how was your day? She offered a dull shrug. Work was the same. Nothing special. She seemed distracted, locked in her own mind. A strange hush followed. I kept my tone even. You on social media a lot lately. She blinked, then forced a laugh. It's part of my job, you know that. She was a freelance marketer, of course I knew that. But her posture gave it away. She sat up too straight. She clutched the phone too tight. I swallowed whatever accusations threatened to rise. There was something in her eyes, a cold distance. This was a woman who, not so long ago, would greet me at the door with a kiss. Now, she barely looked me in the face. The quiet that separated us on the couch felt like an ocean. I realized I wasn't sure if I was angrier at the possibility of her betrayal or at my own inability to break that silence. A few days later, she took the Super Bowl tickets. I had been holding them in my hands, flipping them over and over like some magic card trick that refused to cheer me. We hadn't missed a game in years, some tradition from the time we first got together. But that night, she mentioned something about needing to go with friends, some last-minute plan they'd had for months. She stared at me so intently that I could almost pretend she was worried about how I would react. But when I nodded, she plucked them from my grip and left without another word. Her footsteps in the hallway felt final, like a door slamming behind my back. In that moment, I sensed that she'd won some unspoken battle between us, or maybe I'd simply given up. The strangest part was the eerie acceptance I felt, as though I'd taken a step back and let her destroy her own life. That same acceptance guided me the next day, when I came home to find her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. She was nowhere to be seen. I could hear the shower running upstairs. The screen glowed. I glanced at it. Michael's name. A photo preview. My pulse quickened. For a split second, I hesitated. Perhaps part of me wanted to preserve the ignorance I'd been cradling. Instead, my hand moved on its own, picking up the device. What I saw first was an image of him shirtless, lying on rumpled sheets. Then I swiped further. There she was, my wife, in a partially unbuttoned blouse, arching her back in a way I'd once known intimately. The angle of the camera told me it was done to entice. A hush fell over the room, so heavy I could hear my own breath rattling. More images, stolen moments in dimly lit corners, their faces turned to each other in an unmistakable, hungry closeness. And then something deeper. The silhouettes of two bodies tangled under soft lamplight, partially concealed by shadows, but absolutely undeniable in meaning. My throat constricted. It wasn't some mild flirtation or emotional affair. It was physical. Something you can't take back. I froze. That's when I caught a reflection of myself in the switched-off TV screen, staring, holding her phone, eyes wide as though I'd witnessed a murder. And in a way, maybe I had, an execution of everything I believed marriage was supposed to be. I put the phone down, quietly. My skin felt cold. I didn't scream or break anything. Strangely, my mind felt lucid, my thoughts methodical, as if I were outside my own body. The shower water stopped. I heard the squeak of the faucet. I had a choice. Confront her, or let her keep unraveling. Something about the emptiness in her eyes all these months convinced me to wait. The last images I'd seen were explicit enough that no denial would hold. I needed her to say it out loud, needed to see if she'd lie to my face again. I turned off her phone, placed it exactly where I found it, and grabbed a glass of water. When she came downstairs, hair still damp, she glanced at me with a sort of tired courtesy, the way you might greet a coworker you barely tolerate. I just said, "You left your phone out." She blinked, as if worried I'd seen something. "Thanks," she muttered, picking it up. Her lock screen flickered. I watched her lips purse. She was checking to see if any open apps, any messages had been left on display. When she looked up, there was a faint tremor in her voice. "Did you see anything?" "Nothing worth mentioning," I said. She nodded, then headed to the dining room. I watched her slip the phone into her purse. That was the end of it for the moment. I recall feeling a calm that bordered on surreal. I recognized it later as a stage of grief. Shock, perhaps. Or maybe I was preparing for the next move. I dreamed about the phone that night. In my dream, it was a living thing, pulsing with each notification, dragging me deeper into a labyrinth of deception. I woke up drenched in sweat, a hollow ache in my chest. By dawn, I resolved. I'd break this open, quietly, methodically, like a detective unraveling a suspect's story. Let her talk, let her slip, let her misstep. The next morning, the tension was palpable. Over breakfast, she scrolled again. I sipped my coffee, thinking of how to broach the subject. She seemed lost in thought, thumb flicking across the screen, occasionally pausing. I glimpsed glimpses of text. Michael's name. More messages. I forced my voice to stay neutral. Big day at work. Her shoulders tensed. "I have a meeting," she replied softly. Then she lifted her gaze, forced a smile. Marketing pitch for a new client. A lie. I could sense it. "I might come home late," she added. I nodded, swallowing a wave of nausea. "Got it." I stared at the ring on her finger, that gold band I'd once placed there with trembling anticipation. Now it felt like a ring around a shadow. She left. The echo of her footsteps reminded me of the night with the Super Bowl tickets. Something about that memory twisted in my gut. Maybe it was the moment I realized she'd no longer pretend for my sake. I still went to work. I had responsibilities, a team to manage. In the office, everything felt surreal. I'd catch my own reflection in the screen of my laptop, recalling those photos. My colleagues asked if I was okay. I told them I was just tired. If only they knew how hollow the word tired sounded compared to the reality sinking into my bones. By lunchtime, I was on autopilot. That evening, I came home early and found her not yet there. The house was quiet. Our living room, once warm with personal touches, felt like a museum of memories. I thumbed through the mail, let the hours pass. She walked in around 9, carrying the subtle scent of someone else's cologne on her blouse. I recognized it at once. Something fresh, like the ocean. Possibly expensive. Different from my own subtle woodsy fragrance. She tried to slip past me as though nothing were out of place. "Hey," I said, halting her. "Long meeting?" She paused, dropped her keys with a clink. "Yes." It ran over time. Her face was calm, almost chillingly so. "I'm exhausted." I watched her carefully. "I imagine it's a lot of stress," I murmured. She nodded, eyes flicking to the side. I took one step closer, noticing how she stiffened. "Let's talk for a minute," I said. She let out a short breath, annoyance creeping into her features. "I'm too tired, Robert. Can it wait?" My voice was quiet. "It's important." She glanced at the clock on the wall, as though calculating if she had the energy to indulge me. "Fine. Make it quick." We moved to the living room. I offered her the couch, but she stood behind it, arms crossed protectively in front of her chest. The overhead light cast shadows across her face, accentuating her cheekbones, making her eyes appear sharper. The tension pressed in like a physical weight. I tried to gather my thoughts, to phrase it gently, though I knew there was no gentle approach for what I had to say. "Michael," I began. "Who is he?" She froze, expression flickering from neutral to guarded. "A colleague," she said slowly. "Colleague from where?" I asked, my voice leveling out. I felt like a detective in an interrogation room, leaning forward, making subtle demands for clarity. "From a marketing group." "He's in La." She paused. "We collaborate sometimes." I tilted my head. "And that collaboration involves you liking photos of his child on the beach and late-night phone calls." Her face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" I sighed, fighting the urge to let my voice tremble. "I'm aware you two are close," I said, keeping it measured. "I see how you act when his name shows up. I notice your phone. I notice your posture." She tried to laugh it off, but it came out forced. "You're being paranoid." Her arms tightened around her torso. "People can be friends, you know. Not everything is suspicious." Something in me snapped. My words came out harsher than I intended. Yes, people can be friends, but not every friend sees you half undressed and sends pictures back in equal measure. Her eyes widened. A flush of color stained her cheeks. "You went through my phone." I allowed a small, bitter smirk. "It was lighting up the whole counter, Alice." Then I paused, exhaling a shaky breath. "Look, if you want to keep lying, go ahead. But I've seen the evidence." For an instant, I caught a flicker of shame in her eyes. Then she turned cold, expression flattening like a slammed door. "That's private," she said, voice quivering. "I have a right to privacy." "Yes," I finished. "But we made vows that are supposed to matter more than your right to secret affairs." I turned away, swallowing, feeling a churn of black humor rising in my throat. "You know, ironically, I've always envied your ability to find new connections. Now I see that it's a double-edged sword." She looked at me, and for a moment I thought I glimpsed regret. Then, as if a mental switch flipped, she set her jaw. "I can't do this right now," she said. picking up her purse. She walked upstairs, leaving me alone. I stayed in the living room a long time, staring at the place where she'd just stood. Her silhouette was carved into my memory. Part of me wanted to chase her, to force her to talk. Another part recognized it was useless. She'd grown colder than ice. An image from one of the photos flashed through my mind. Her half-naked, back arched, eyes brimming with a desire she no longer showed me. I felt a twisted grin creep onto my face, a sense of bitterness so profound it almost tasted sweet. That was my black humor. At least she's flexible, I whispered to myself. Then I hated myself for stooping so low. Days dragged by. She carried on as though everything were normal, except now our civility had the hollow ring of a forced performance. I kept my distance, watching from the periphery, noticing each secret text, every late-night conversation that ended abruptly when I walked in. She tried to cover her tracks, but not with much effort. It was like she no longer cared if I knew. I felt invisible in my own home. She told me she needed more personal space. I gave it to her, in spades. I even spent extra hours at the office, burying myself in tasks. The memory of those pictures haunted me, but it also gave me purpose, some twisted sense of finality. Because I had a plan, you see. I'd let her bury herself in her little illusions. And then, like a door slamming shut, I'd cut off her exit routes. It started small. I canceled the shared credit card we used for online orders. I told the bank I'd lost it. She discovered it when she tried to pay for something at a boutique. She returned home that evening angry, spouting words about inconvenience, about how she needed that card for daily essentials. I shrugged and said, I'll replace it soon. The next day, I paused her phone line, claiming I needed to update the plan. For hours, her phone calls wouldn't go through. She paced the living room, frustration flaring in her eyes. I sipped coffee, letting that silent tension brew. My mind repeated a single phrase. This is what betrayal feels like. You sever the lines. You watch the panic. She looked at me like I was a monster. And I felt like one, though the black humor in me whispered that it was a fair trade for everything she'd done. I told her it was a simple technical glitch, that I'd fix it by morning. She didn't believe me, but she had no proof. Still, the next day, I restored the phone line. I wanted her uncertain, not entirely cut off, just enough to see the walls creeping in. I remember how she rummaged through her things that night, searching for some answer. Meanwhile, I observed from the hallway, imagining the frantic thoughts swirling in her head. The final blow came when I blocked her access to our joint bank account. I'd been transferring funds slowly into an account in my name alone, leaving just enough that it appeared normal. Then, with a single phone call, I froze the joint assets, citing a need for security checks. That evening, she tried to withdraw cash and found her card declined. She called me, voice trembling with anger, fear. I listened to her accusations. You did this. You're punishing me. My response was calm. I'm simply protecting our finances. There was suspicious activity. She stared at me in shock. Suspicious activity. You're insane. Her eyes flared. Then she tried to reason, asking me to clarify. But I spoke in clipped, methodical tones, like a detective refusing to yield. She slammed the door to our bedroom, locking herself in. I spent the night on the couch, that cold satisfaction and an equally chilling emptiness warring inside me. I hadn't realized how thoroughly I'd become the author of her downfall, or how deeply it was costing my own peace. That night, I dreamt of standing on a cliff's edge, watching her tumble into the abyss below. She wore the same clothes from one of Michael's photographs, a blouse slipping off her shoulders, a breast strap undone. She reached for me, but I didn't move. I just watched her fall. When I woke, my breath caught in my throat. I felt something akin to heartbreak layered with vengeance. Two heavy stones balancing on a scale. By the time morning light streamed through the window, everything about her had changed. She looked at me like a wounded animal, cornered, uncertain whether to lash out or beg for mercy. I could see she was losing friends too. Certain acquaintances we shared, people who had once admired her. Word was getting out, though I never told them anything directly. I suspect she tried to borrow money or rely on them for a placed event. Perhaps some drifted away upon sensing the drama was too messy. Her circle was shrinking, and the knowledge of it gave me no real pleasure, but some cold sense of closure. She tried to reach out to Michael. I saw the logs of missed calls, but it seemed he'd grown distant. Maybe the inconvenience of dealing with a married lover who was spiraling out of control had put him off. Maybe he was busy with his next conquest or a new project. The details barely mattered. She was alone. And in that isolation, she finally noticed I was still there. One night, she approached me, tears clinging to the edges of her eyes. "Robert," she said quietly, "I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry about things. Can we talk?" I stared at her for a long moment, considering. Part of me wanted to hold her, to kiss her forehead, to say everything would be all right. That part was suffocating under the weight of betrayal. Instead, I stepped back, crossing my arms. "What would you like to discuss?" Her lower lip trembled. "Can we fix this? Is there a chance?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. It sounded more like a choked cough. "Fix what, exactly?" "The fact that you and Michael decided to share each other in every sense of the word, or the lies you've stacked up for months." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She swallowed hard, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "I made a mistake." My voice was cold. "Yes, you did. You've made many. Now I'm making mine." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, feeling that black humor swirl up again. "Let's just say I returned the favor. I messed with your accounts, your phone, your entire world. Because I could. Because that's what you taught me. Do what you want, consequences be damned." She gasped softly, as though finally seeing me in a new light. "You can't do this," she whispered. I met her gaze. "I already have." Then I walked upstairs, leaving her trembling in the living room. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at my own reflection, trying to recognize the man I'd become. Days turned into a surreal blur. She was stuck, reliant on me. Her voice lost that brisk, confident edge. I overheard her calling her mother, or maybe her sister, desperately trying to find assistance or sympathy. I could piece together the conversation. Things like, "He cut me off," and "I don't know how to fix this." I listened from the hallway, feeling a numbness spread through my chest. My black humor whispered, "She doesn't know how to fix it. Maybe call Michael's child. Perhaps he'll help." At times, the absurdity of the entire situation weighed on me so strongly, I nearly laughed out loud. I pictured the day she stole the Super Bowl tickets with a wave of her hand, acting as though I was irrelevant. It was such a mundane detail, but it epitomized the arrogance of her assumption, that I'd always be there, passively supportive. Then, seeing how she scrolled through Michael's pictures in front of me, thinking I'd never notice. It was all so naive. Yet I wasn't proud of the revenge I'd taken. It left a bitter taste. One afternoon, I came home early. She was rummaging in the dresser, possibly searching for some document or old credit card. I cleared my throat, and she startled, spinning around. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red from crying. A spark of anger flashed. "Where are my old statements?" I made a vague gesture, probably locked away. "Safe from your attempt to run off with them." She pressed her lips tight. "I never tried to run off with anything. She paused, letting out a ragged breath. "It was one mistake, Robert." I could only stare at her. "One mistake," repeated a dozen times. "Don't minimize it." She nodded, tears glistening. "Fine. I was stupid, selfish. But do you have to destroy me for it? We had a life together. Doesn't that matter?" My chest felt heavy. I wanted to shout. It mattered to me. But all that came out was a resigned whisper. "You threw it away." "I'm only finishing the job." She looked like she might collapse. Stop punishing me. I haven't even started, I said, and my own words scared me. They sounded so harsh, but they tumbled out before I could reel them back. She let out a shuddering sob, sinking onto the bed, face in her hands. I watched, arms crossed, war raging inside me. That once warm place in my heart refused to budge, overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. After a moment, I walked out, leaving her alone with her tears. Eventually, Michael did call her. I overheard part of the conversation late one night when I passed the guest room, where she'd taken to sleeping. The door was cracked. I heard her frantic voice. "Why haven't you responded? I need you." Then a pause. A tremor in her voice. "You can't just vanish." Another pause. I heard her mention money, confusion, fear. She wanted him to help, to fix. Then, quietly, she said, "I can't keep living here like this." I braced myself. Did that mean she planned to leave? But then her tone changed. She sounded desperate, as though begging him to be a safety net. My instincts told me he was backing away, making excuses, turning cold. She repeated, "Please, just listen." Her voice cracked. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry," and hung up, letting out a sound I can only describe as heartbreak incarnate. I wonder if she recognized the irony. The heartbreak she inflicted on me was now devouring her from the inside. For a moment, I wanted to comfort her. Then I remembered those pictures of them, the half-lidded gaze she wore for him, and the urge died. I descended the stairs, noticing the hush that settled on the house. If there was any victory in seeing her broken, it was the most hollow victory I'd ever felt. This was not the life I'd signed up for. Late that night, I drank whiskey alone, letting the silence expand. A numbness spread through me, and I realized with a start that I was punishing myself. My home was no longer a refuge. It was a battleground of glances and withheld words, and I was no better than the enemy I so despised. One evening, I couldn't bear it any longer. The tension, the constant swirl of regret and bitterness, the knowledge that I was turning into something monstrous. I decided it was time. Time for that final closure, the end of whatever this grotesque dance was. She was sitting in the living room, legs drawn up beneath her, wearing an old sweater. The once so meticulously kept hair was disheveled, her cheeks hollow from stress. She saw me approach, and her eyes flickered with fear and resignation. Without preamble, I sat in the armchair across from her. We stared at each other. The silence was almost unbearable, but I needed it there, heavy and real. I spoke quietly, each word weighed. "I saw your pictures with him." Her gaze sank. She didn't bother denying it. "I know," she whispered. "I guessed." I gripped the arms of the chair. "You asked me if we can fix this, if we can fix us. That's not possible anymore." She swallowed. "I understand." My throat felt tight. "Do you? You destroyed something fundamental in me." I paused, letting the words hang. But maybe I destroyed something fundamental in myself too. By dragging out this revenge, crippling your finances, making you suffer. She looked away, tears brimming. "I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted something else, something new. I was wrong." The words sounded so small, so insufficient for the havoc she'd caused. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate the honesty, late as it is, but I can't keep living under the same roof, poisoning both of us." She raised her eyes, tears slipping down. "What will happen now?" I closed my eyes for a moment, a dull ache in my temples. "I'm leaving," I said evenly. "This house will go up for sale. You'll receive your share of whatever is left. I've already undone the freeze on your portion. You'll be able to survive, but I'm not responsible for your choices anymore. As for me, I don't know where I'll go, but I can't stay here." She gave a tiny nod, her voice cracking. "You're really done." I stood, swallowing the lump in my throat. What else is there? We're strangers at this point, and not even friendly ones. She didn't respond. She just stared at the floor, trembling. Some part of me wanted to kneel down, to lift her chin, to say something gentle. But I remembered the images, the half-naked entanglements that used to be ours. The recollection flickered, and the old fury tightened my chest. I turned and left the room. She didn't call after me. It took me 2 days to pack the essentials. I called a lawyer, set in motion the necessary legal steps. I found a short-term rental across town, somewhere with fewer memories. Each time I crossed the hallway carrying boxes, I felt her eyes on me from a distance, but she never approached. On the final day, I left behind only a piece of paper with 2 words: goodbye, forever. I placed it on the coffee table, in plain sight. I paused before stepping out the door, glancing back at the living room where we once laughed, hosted friends, built illusions. The final blow of emptiness hit me. This was a funeral for the living. A twisted part of me whispered that she got what she deserved. Another part recognized that vengeance had a steep price, leaving me more hollow than I ever wanted to be. I stood on the porch. The evening air was cold, biting at my skin. I could hear the faint sound of her in the house, maybe pacing or sobbing. I imagined the swirl of regret, confusion, and isolation she must feel. My chest tightened. But I forced myself to walk down the steps, load the last box into my car, and drive away. The headlights cut a swath through the darkness, guiding me into a future I'd never planned to face alone. Halfway to my new place, I pulled into a gas station. As I filled the tank, I stared at the convenience store window, the fluorescent lights flickering on and off. I remembered the photograph of that little boy on Michael's feed, the one she liked so tenderly. I wondered if, in some twisted sense, that child represented the family she might have wanted, or a life with fewer constraints. Then I shook my head. My own black humor surfaced, telling me it was ridiculous to dwell on that. She hadn't cared enough about the family she already had. Or maybe she did, once. But that once was gone. I walked inside the store, bought a bottle of water, then leaned against my car, staring at the highway. Each passing car's headlights momentarily illuminated me, like a spotlight exposing every regret. I thought about the day she first told me she loved me, how her eyes lit up with genuine warmth. I thought about the time we visited the ocean together. I remembered her laughter echoing in my ears. Now that laughter was replaced by the memory of how she sounded when she talked to him in hushed, intimate tones. I couldn't decide which version hurt more. The memory of our happiness, or the reality of our betrayal. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. My chest felt tight. The last conversation we had replayed in my mind. She'd seemed so small, so vulnerable. For a split second, I questioned if I should have given her a second chance. Then I remembered the emptiness in her gaze for all those months, the way she treated me like background noise while she built a separate life with him. Realizing that trust was gone put a final lock on that door. I opened the car door, lowered myself into the driver's seat, and started the engine. In that quiet hum, I recognized a subtle shift inside me, like stepping from one stage of life into another. There was no going back, only forward, carrying scars that might never fully heal. That was the price of betrayal. I put the car into gear and pulled onto the highway, merging with traffic, letting the past slip behind me like a dark wave. In the days that followed, I existed in a strange daze. I closed on the rental property, set up my minimal belongings. The house we'd shared was on the market, though the realtor told me not to expect a quick sale at a good price. I told her I didn't care about the price, only the speed. My lawyer assured me the rest of the process was straightforward. Through it all, I carried the residue of anger and heartbreak. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying each moment of realization. I'd wonder if there was any chance we could have salvaged something had we addressed the problem sooner. That pointless speculation churned inside me, mocking my attempts at closure. I tried to bury myself in work. My colleagues noticed my subdued demeanor, but I gave them little to go on. Outside of the office, I had nowhere to be. No dinners to rush home for. No small talk about each other's day. That silence weighed on me, an echo of the life I left behind. And yet I told myself it was better than living in the same house with a stranger whose body I recognized, but whose heart I no longer knew. Weeks later, I heard from her once. She called late at night, presumably guessing I'd be alone. I answered out of morbid curiosity. Her voice sounded hollow, as if she'd lost whatever spark once defined her. She said, "I just wanted you to know I moved out." I guessed she meant from the house, that she was renting somewhere else. "I wanted to make it easier to sell," she explained in a thin tone. I just said, "All right." Silence stretched on the line. She hesitated. "I'm sorry, Robert. Truly." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow exhale. That apology felt so fragile, so delayed. "I know," I said. Then I hung up. There was nothing else to add. Time passed. I began building a routine in my new place. It was smaller, more modern, a shell lacking the personal touches that once warmed my old home. But it was a start. Each day the rawness of betrayal stung a little less, though I suspected it would always remain to some degree. I lived with it, a quiet companion whispering caution whenever I thought about trusting again. One morning, I scrolled through my own social media, something I hadn't done much in the aftermath. I found a new friend request from her. I didn't accept or decline. I just stared at it, wondering what part of me she still wanted to reach. I set my phone aside, stepping away. That was the final step to reclaiming some piece of myself, leaving that request unanswered. In the hush of my living room, I realized the entire ordeal had carved out a new person in my skin, someone both stronger and more brittle. I'd glimpsed the darkest corners of my own heart, discovered the lengths I'd go to for revenge, and I'd recognized how little satisfaction it brought. I had inflicted my share of pain, but the emptiness inside me had only grown. The black humor that once bubbled up whenever I thought about her predicament no longer amused me. It left a bitter aftertaste, as if I'd tried to outpoison the person who wounded me, only to swallow the venom myself. Late that night, I found myself smiling grimly at the memory of her rummaging for her phone, frantic, and how I calmly told her it was just a glitch. That moment summed up the entire fiasco. A broken couple, each unable to bridge the chasm, each punishing the other in ways that left no real winners. I closed my eyes, letting the memory drift away. I whispered to the emptiness, "Goodbye. Forever." Months turned into a slow acceptance. The house sold. Our lawyer hammered out the final details. The money was split. There was no dramatic scene in a courtroom, just signatures and polite nods. At the end of it, the clerk said a simple phrase, "You're officially divorced." I nodded, left the building, and stepped into the bright afternoon sun. There was no heartbreak at that moment, just a quiet relief. In the following weeks, I found a tiny spark of forward motion. Work kept me busy. The city bustled with life, even as I remained cautious. Sometimes I'd see a couple walking hand in hand, and a pang would dart through me. But I pressed on, telling myself that trust, if it ever came again, would have to be earned differently. One evening, while sitting alone in my living room, I recalled the last time I truly felt married. The day we planned to attend the Super Bowl. She'd been excited, or so I thought. And then she walked off with the tickets, leaving me behind, oblivious to the finality of that moment. In a way, that was our turning point, a microcosm of the way she took what she wanted without thought to how it left me. I sipped a drink and let out a low chuckle. I didn't regret letting her have them. It was a small sacrifice to discover the truth. Sometimes I drifted into a near-sleep state, imagining that child in Michael's photograph, the one that first caught my eye. For some reason, that child's face symbolized a life I'd wanted. An honest family, shared joys, a future built on mutual trust. Yet I realized that was an illusion from the start if one partner wasn't fully present. So I let that daydream fade. We all have illusions, but illusions can't hold a marriage together. I breathed in, exhaled slowly, and felt the edges of my new life forming. It was lonely, yes, but it was unburdened. I could start from scratch, piece by piece. My mind carried the lines of a quiet vow to myself that next time, if there ever was a next time, I would not ignore the signs. I would speak up early or walk away before letting betrayal rot my soul. In the end, there was no thunderous closure, no final showdown. Just a man, once a husband, now free of the illusions that chained him, and a woman who tasted the sweet rush of infidelity, only to choke on its consequences. Somewhere in Los Angeles, that lover Michael probably carried on in his carefree manner, leaving behind a chaos he helped spark. I wasn't sure how it ended between them, nor did I particularly care. I'd done enough damage to my own heart seeking retribution, and I had no desire to track his. So, this is it, my final statement of that chapter in my life. When I remember her now, I sometimes recall the echo of her laughter from better days, or the faint click of her phone camera capturing moments we once deemed precious. But I also recall the stark photographs that shattered everything, the ring that meant nothing in the end, and my own savage revenge that devoured both of us. My last image of her is that tear-streaked face, a silent plea I had no capacity to answer. Maybe I never will. She took the Super Bowl tickets. She took my trust. She tried to take the best of me. But in the end, I reclaimed my self-worth, though at a terrible cost. And now, all that's left is the lingering taste of bitterness, a vow never to let such betrayal go unchecked again, and a faint, unsteady hope that someday I might find a reason to trust someone new. As for her, I left her 2 words. It's all either of us deserved after the illusions we fed on for too long. Goodbye. Forever. Then I turned, stepped into the future, and let the shadows of our past settle behind me like dust.